Will McKenna zipped up his jacket, breath clouding the cold morning air as he carefully navigated the rugged trail into the woods. It was still dark, the sun only beginning to tease the horizon with a pale glow. Will had been waiting for this weekend for months, and finally, it was here, the first weekend of the fall hunting season. At 16, Will had been hunting with his dad for years, but this time he was going it alone. He shouldered his trusty Winchester 30-30 rifle and adjusted his backpack, feeling the cool metal of his ammo belt brush against his side. He was ready. The woods were quiet except for the sound of the wind rattling the dry fallen leaves. The occasional caw of a crow echoed through the trees, but otherwise it was just Will in the wilderness. He'd hiked almost 3 miles deep into the woods by now, far beyond where most hunters bothered to go. That was part of the plan. If he wanted to bag a decent buck, he needed to be where the deer felt safe. His eyes scanned the forest floor as he moved, searching for any signs of deer. It wasn't long before he spotted them, a scrape in the dirt, followed by rubs on small trees. His pulse quickened. A buck had been here recently, thrashing its antlers against the trunks. This was a good sign, a very good sign. Will crouched down, resting the butt of his rifle against his knee as he surveyed the area. It was early, the wind biting at his cheeks, and the ground was still crisp with frost. He decided this was the spot. He settled in behind a thick cluster of bushes, giving him good cover and a clear view of the open woods in front of him. He waited. The minutes ticked by slowly, the anticipation building. Will's breath slowed to match the quiet rhythm of the forest. His fingers, despite the gloves, were growing cold from gripping the rifle. He didn't move. This was the patience his father had taught him. The wait was half the hunt. Then, just as the sun began to rise higher in the sky, casting a golden light through the trees, he saw movement, a flash of brown, followed by the subtle crack of a twig. His heart leapt. He squinted, searching for the source. And there it was, about 50 yards away, moving cautiously through the trees. A buck, and a good one too. Its antlers rose up, a solid 4-pointer, not a monster but respectable, perfect for a first solo hunt. Will steadied himself, bringing his 30-30 up to his shoulder, aligning the iron sights with the buck. The wind was in his favor, blowing his scent away from the deer. He exhaled slowly, feeling the smooth, familiar weight of the rifle in his hands. This was it. The buck paused, its head lifting, sniffing the air. Breathe steady, Will reminded himself. He gently squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle echoed through the woods. The buck jolted, leaping forward, but Will saw the hit was good, right behind the shoulder. Still, the deer bolted into the trees, disappearing into the underbrush. Will's adrenaline surged. He stood, slinging the rifle over his shoulder as he hurried to where the deer had stood. His eyes scanned the ground, and there it was, a bright red smear of blood on the frosty leaves. He knelt, heart still pounding, as he found the beginning of the blood trail. The buck had run deeper into the woods. Will knew this was part of the hunt, but the tracking always made his stomach knot. He started following the trail, carefully stepping over fallen branches and through dense patches of underbrush. The blood trail was steady, reassuring him that the deer wouldn't be far. Minutes passed, and the trail led him deeper into the forest. The wind was picking up, and the sun had climbed higher, but the chill of the morning still clung to the air. It had to be close to noon, Will thought. He pushed forward, heart racing with the thrill of the hunt and the hope of finding the buck soon. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of tracking, he spotted it, a patch of brown fur lying motionless just ahead. Relief washed over him. The buck was down. Will approached cautiously, his breath coming in short, excited bursts. He knelt beside the animal, running a hand over its thick, warm coat. It was a beautiful deer, but now came the part he dreaded, dressing the animal. Will took out his hunting knife, its blade sharp and clean. He'd done this before, of course, but never alone. The smell hit him as he made the first cut, his stomach turning slightly. He worked slowly, methodically, just as his dad had taught him, though he fumbled with the entrails, his hands cold and stiff. It wasn't pretty, but it was done. The buck was dressed. He took a moment to catch his breath, looking down at his kill. This was the reward for all the hours of waiting, the freezing mornings, and the long hike into the woods. But now came the next challenge, getting it out. Will looked around, realizing how far in he was. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. He was at least 3.5 miles from the truck, maybe more. He tied a rope around the buck's legs, securing it tightly before beginning the arduous task of dragging the deer out. It was slow going, the ground was uneven, and the buck was heavy, but Will gritted his teeth and kept pulling. The wind had picked up, cold and biting, and he could feel the fatigue setting in. The woods around him began to feel darker, more foreboding as the light dimmed. Then he heard it, a distant howl. Coyotes. His blood ran cold for a moment, but he quickly pushed down the fear. He knew these woods well, had grown up wandering them with his dad. The coyotes weren't close, yet, but they'd catch the scent of the deer soon enough. He had to keep moving. As the sun dipped lower, the howls came again, closer this time. Will's muscles screamed from the effort of dragging the deer, but he pressed on. The sound of the coyotes seemed to grow louder, the pack closing in, their yips and howls echoing eerily through the trees. The truck was still a ways off. His breath came in ragged gasps, the weight of the buck almost too much. He could see the sky turning a deep purple now, night fast approaching. Another howl, much closer now. He looked over his shoulder and saw them, just a glimpse of shapes moving through the trees, low to the ground, shadows in the fading light. His heart raced, but Will stayed calm, kept moving. He wasn't about to let a pack of coyotes scare him off. Finally, just as the last sliver of daylight slipped below the horizon, he saw it, the truck. Relief washed over him, but he didn't stop. He could hear the coyotes closer now, the sound of their paws crunching through the underbrush. He reached the truck, the deer still in tow, and threw open the tailgate. He quickly hoisted the buck up into the bed, his muscles burning with the effort. He could feel the coyotes just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. With one last glance toward the dark woods, Will slammed the tailgate shut and jumped into the driver's seat. He turned the key, the engine roaring to life just as the coyotes emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing in the truck's headlights. He drove off, heart still racing, but a wide grin spread across his face. He had done it, his first solo hunt, the thrill of the chase, the weight of the kill, the challenge of the woods. It was all part of what made hunting worth it. As he drove home, exhausted but triumphant, he couldn't wait to tell his dad all about it.